All right, welcome to the latest edition of Indy Stars Pacers podcast from way downtown with Indy Stars Pacers insider Dustin Topurak. I am Mac Linesk. Dustin, Pacers are streaking 5 in a row. They have the fourth spot. They've got a little bit of breathing room now over Milwaukee and Detroit with the fourth spot. Another big win Monday night against the Timberwolves. Obi Toppin doing what he does. Apparently, he's got things against Wolves.
Apparently so,
because he's out there killing them.
Right.
And
he's
then
from Brooklyn. I don't know how many Wolves he's run into in his life, but
he came to the press conference with a Wolf's coat. It looks like he wore them out. Might as well wear it to the press conference.
That's fair, exactly. Just like he just skinned somebody. I'm sure he never that did not cross his mind one single time. But
I'm sure.
But yeah.
All right. But so we'll talk about the Pacers. The streak that they're on. Of course, they play the Lakers on Wednesday night in their playoffs. We'll talk about that. But let's start with. It seems to be one of the hot topics around this team, Bennedict Mathurin. Obviously, he's got an immense amount of talent. Everyone can see that. And when Tyrese Halliburton doesn't play, Bennedict Mathurin is like, hey, go get us Rick says to Ben, go get us a bucket, carry this team offensively, to an extent. You have a story up on IndyStar.com. It was in Monday's print edition. It's getting very well read. So it seems to be, it hit a nerve with the fan base. It seems to be a topic that they all want to talk about, and especially with his contract situation coming up this summer where he can be extended on his rookie deal. There's a lot of what do we do with Mathurin kind of thing because he is an asset. People watch him like that's an NBA player, potential all-star player. So just talk us through, the story and where they're at. You called it the Bennedict Mathurin conundrum, and it is that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's obviously been something they've been working through for years. And obviously the kind of trajectory of the Pacers rebuild has made this sort of a trickier thing because a lot of things happen faster, than you would expect. I mean, I think, prior to Mathurin, they hadn't picked in the top 9 since 1989. I mean, obviously the Pacers had been in that pocket of pretty good, usually playoff team or close to it for all that time. And they've rarely been in a position where they were as down as they were and as committed to kind of a start over rebuild as they were. But obviously moves they made still made that happen faster, going to get Tyrese Halliburton with the Domas Sabonis trade and suddenly being like, oh, okay, well, this is going to happen quick. They're actually not going to be bad for a long time. And he really only had 1 year where they could really just let him be him. And basically they were trying to win games, but I mean, they weren't necessarily, when it came close and they were like, you guys might make the play-in game, they kind of, shut that down a little bit toward the end of that season. And they let Mathurin just go and just sort of find out what was there. And obviously he'd been this very just sort of killer of a scorer as a sophomore in Arizona. That's why he was top 6 pick overall. He ends up, third all time among Pacers rookies in points behind Clark Kellogg and Chuck Person. First Pacer to be named first team all rookie since Rick Smits in '89. I mean, they did a lot of stuff that nobody had ever done. But in the same course of that year, you see Tyrese Halliburton clearly become the guy. And obviously they give him the max extension that summer. And, they played together reasonably well, but you could see sort of there are these two kind of emerging styles that, Mathurin is a guy that kind of wants you to get you an ISO. And like Mathurin lives off the idea of embarrassing you one-on-one. Like that is like his driving force. I mean, like he's had these occasions where he's been like kind of a guest interviewer, a guest reporter for things. And he asks reminds the first thing he does when he's talking to another player is remind him that he beat them on one-on-one once in.
He said he was better than LeBron coming into the season,
right?
Or coming into his rookie year. Yeah, exactly.
So and it's driven by this one-on-one mentality, and he wants to get you so you're square, he's square, and he's going to beat you. And the Pacers offense does not like that Halliburton runs around is kind of built on the opposite principle. It's keep it moving so fast that the defense cannot keep up with you. Basically like pass until you get this open shot. Play with a lot of velocity, play with a lot of pace. Obviously go and fast break if you can. And it's not that Mathurin doesn't have the capacity to play with it within that, but it's just he's just wired to just go at somebody, and he's good at finishing through contact, and he's really good at drawing fouls, and that's what really that's what kind of drove his scoring in his rookie year. I mean, I think he was probably second in free throws out of all rookies. I mean, like Banchero, because he's huge, was rookie of the year that year, and I think he was the only guy that had got any more, but he was right there with them. And so, but when they kind of figure out they're going to go in this different direction, that it's got to be this way. Carlisle's been working with him since then to be like, okay, like you have all these talents and they can fit They're not a natural fit, but they can. If you move without the ball well, if you catch and shoot really quickly, if you make quick decisions, you're still going to be able to be really successful in this, and you're going to fit. And it's worked. He has gotten better each year, and even basically while Aaron Nesmith was hurt, they had really good net rating figures for that starting lineup. He fit pretty well. He got to be a better defender. Saw him get more efficient as a scorer, but it's still not the natural thing. And for Aaron Nesmith, he's really natural as a wing in that system, because he's just catch and shoot guy, doesn't need the ball a lot, drives when he has a clear lane, moves the ball when he doesn't. He's very, is very disciplined to what the three spot, the kind of wing position kind of needs in that system. And Mathurin still has that itch to just go after guys. And every once in a while, you'll see him drive into two people to try to draw contact. And so these things don't fit. But then, when Halliburton's out and, you might have as much ball movement, but you don't have the same kind of gravity. I mean, like Halliburton comes off a ball screen and he drives brings two guys with him. And he does that kick back over his shoulder pass to Turner, who's standing there at the top of the key and hits a three. That stuff doesn't necessarily happen when Nembhard's the point guard. It's not because again, you don't move as many bodies. You can switch, or you can, have the Nembhard's defender stay with him and make sure there's still somebody on Turner. There's just not as much open space. And so somewhere the play breaks down, you either go to Siakam for a turnaround jumper, or you ask Mathurin to drive into bodies and try to get a foul. And so you're asking two different things from him. And I think there's been this notion that Mathurin's being held back, and in a way he is, because he's not being the central focus of all of it. But I don't think everybody sometimes realizes just how powerful of a force Halliburton's offense is. I think if you're a Pacers fan in particular, you kind of get used to it, and you also almost have to step back and see how effective they are. Like last year, they scored the sixth most points all time in the NBA, most in 40 years in this league. And we're the second most efficient offense in the league. I mean, that is a force. And then, especially over the last, since Halliburton has been, just automatic, since the All-Star break. I mean, when Halliburton's on the floor and Aaron Nesmith's on the floor, like their offensive rating is like 1.24. Like it's massive. I mean, like they're like top, out of guys to play heavy minutes, they're like top 5 in the league right now since the break in offensive rating. I think two of the only guys that are ahead of them are Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So like it really is a force. I mean, when you saw like Halliburton come back, even in that, game against the Nets where it was a little bit messy on Saturday, but I mean, just the ball, you could just see it's just a dramatically different system. And I think just after Mathurin had all those great games where Rick really kind of, it kind of poured out of Rick that he's like, felt like I had to talk to Mathurin about this to say, like, I get that you're this good. Like, I get that I can, if we want to spread it out and put you in ISO and run 1-4 flat and just have you run at bodies, you're going to score on a lot of occasions, or you're going to draw fouls, but that's just not what's best. And what that means is, I mean, he's really, really good at it, but I mean, he is not in fact automatic. He's not scoring every time down. Sometimes he's going to run into two bodies and turn it over. Sometimes he's going to get blocked. Sometimes he's not going to get the call. Like it ultimately is more efficient when they're moving the ball and they're creating open shots and they're creating open layups and they're pushing the ball. Like it is more efficient to play the way that they play, like statistically it certainly is, but individually it might not be best for Mathurin's development in the sense of making him an all-star. Like there is a chance that if he goes somewhere else and he's the centerpiece of everything, maybe he does average 25-27 a game one year, and that makes him an all-star. But that team might not be as good. That team built around him might not win at the level that this one could. So it is. I think some people do seem to think that it's personal with Rick, and it really isn't. And he has really been working hard with Mathurin to try to make this work, and they've had legitimate progress. But it just looks funky when you go from 3 games of he's averaging 20 to he gets to halftime and he's only got 4 points. But I mean, I think he is learning. I think he is getting better. The issue is going to be though, when you start to talk about money, like he can fit with this starting group. He can play with them. I don't think he's as good of a defender as Nesmith. He's not as natural of a fit, but certainly they were just fine when Nesmith was out and he was in the starting lineup. They were excellent at some points. And so it's not like he can't do this, and he's getting to be better at defense, but he's not like the rule that he will play does not necessarily command $25 million a year. It certainly doesn't command a max contract. So that puts him in a position where it's like, okay, well, does it make sense to stick around with this? You could win more, and it's altogether possible. He didn't get to appear in the playoffs last year, and it's something that he continues to mention because of his torn labrum. Hey, I didn't get to do this yet. I want to see what this is like. I can't wait to see what this is like. And maybe he gets a taste of winning with this and says, I want to do this forever. I don't really care if I'm the guy or not. But it also could be like, maybe he averages 10 a game in the playoffs or 8 a game in the playoffs. And he suddenly thinks to himself, like one, I'm better than this. And two, like somebody else will let me do it and pay me that way. And so that's the path I have to take. So it's going to be interesting on both levels, but I do think, I thought it was interesting on Carlisle's part just to really, express the extent that he's been dealing with this riddle, and that it is a difficult riddle to try to solve when you're looking at how do you develop one guy individually who's an immense talent, but when you have this system that is, very rare in terms of its productivity in NBA history, and those two things don't necessarily drive, trying to make them drive, trying to fit those pieces together and make them work, while also not wanting to take away some of the things that make Ben Mathurin. And every once in a while, you do have to play a game when you don't have this kind of generational point guard, and you still need to go win games. Like you still need him to be him those nights, but you want him to be something different when Halliburton's around, and it's tricky, and it's tricky to try to coach somebody up that way. It's tricky to, kind of be operating on these two separate planes. And so I thought it was interesting, a guy that's been in the league, that, coaching in the league that long, kind of expressed the uniqueness of what he's saying, that he's basically asking him to play two different styles of basketball.
When you talk about the money, is there enough to give him his contract, whatever it may be, and bring back Miles Turner as well? I mean, because there's, Toppin's on a big deal. Neesmith is making decent money. You obviously have Siakam and Halliburton on max contracts as well. So, I mean, how much money really is there to play with to keep the core together?
Well, you
or
can't.
Is he an asset?
I don't know how much Herb Simon has, but obviously you can keep going up. Like you can go well into the tax. The issue is it starts to get restrictive as to your future moves. So for one thing, to start with, like if the extensions don't kick in until the following year. So like Mathurin won't make, just like Halliburton didn't start making his money until this year, even though he signed the contract, in summer of 23. It's going to be a similar situation there. If Mathurin signs an extension this year, it doesn't kick in until what would be the 26-27 season, because this is going to be 25-26. So, you have another year where that's not part of your cap hits. Same deal with, Andrew Nembhard this year is still playing on last year's deal, but that money kicks. Starting this year. And so like the number goes high, but I mean, obviously, basically what the cap allows for is for you to keep your guys. You can continue to spend more money to keep your guys. But, again, owner pays tax on that. And then that's when you get into the aprons in terms of trades that you can make and moves that you can make. And it restricts you a lot. And obviously you've got draft picks you got to concern yourself about that take more money and everything like that. And so everything becomes a little bit more restrictive, So, and again, like it's Herb Simon's money, how much, because you're not then just paying for the players you have, you're eventually just giving money to the league at the tax. And I can't remember what the dollar for dollar tax line is.
Well, he's 90 years old. Maybe he's just like, hey, I want to see a championship. I want all chips in. Let me get a championship before I hand this off.
And the question becomes for him, that he has to ask, and basically Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan and Rick Carlisle have to make the case for him that, all right, am I paying for a championship, or am I paying for a team that's going to get beat in the Eastern Conference Finals for 5 years? Am I ultimately paying for a team that's good enough to really win it, or am I paying for a team that's good enough to almost win it? And consistently almost win it. And that's a tough call, and I think obviously with Boston being, what they are, I mean, you have to presume that they're going to be powerful for years. Obviously you don't know what the level of staying power is for Cleveland to be this good. And that's just in the East. Certainly the Knicks are going to be a force to be reckoned with going forward. I think you'll see a team like, the Magic obviously had a tough year from an injury standpoint, but they're going to be right there. It's tough for you to claim kind of supremacy in the East and say, all right, like you basically have to make the case of like you're putting together the best roster in the East, and is that would you be better off with some flexibility? Would you be better off with the opportunity to move some guys? Is there another piece that you really think you need to be that team? And so, I mean, I think I certainly think that if you're Herb, you're thinking, you've been an owner in this league for how long, and you've gotten close, and you've been consistently really good, and you've never had that great team. And so you would ask the question, and not just Herb. I mean, you're the Simon family, and basically, if Pritchard and Buchanan and Ted Wu and that team are coming to you and saying, you need this money, like the question that you have to ask is, all right, are you just building the next really good Pacers team that gets far in the playoffs but doesn't quite get there, or is this really the one? And what does that take? And so but obviously it does get trickier. Obviously the money does get trickier. I do think they're going to have to move somebody. Obi is probably top on the list at the end of the day, for as good of a week as he had, and as much as they love him, and and he makes the game fun to watch, and you get these highlight dunks every once in a while, and he's a great locker room presence. 4 years, 58 was a lot to pay for him. Was a whole lot. Now, that also makes him movable. That makes him move, because you're going to have to, if you want to go get somebody who's somewhat established, you're going to have to pile contracts together. I think, I feel like some just random, loose Pacers Twitter talk is like, maybe they could get, Devin Booker for Bennedict Mathurin. And that could happen in baseball, like in a league where it's like you can trade young assets for established players to teams, that are, basically trying to rebuild and start over. But that money doesn't match, unless you, unless you sign him to the extension and then deal him. But you have to, and you wouldn't be able to make that work until next year anyway. So, like, the money has to match. You can't, Devin Booker probably makes, I'm not looking at the thing right now. Was he make 40, 50 million a year, something like that. And Mathurin is probably at like 9 or 10 at this point on his rookie scale deal. So, you got to find another 40 million to send over. And the Suns, I think the last time I checked, they were in the second apron. So, that's very restrictive. You have to take in as much money as you're sending out, in that case, especially I think if you're not, I think you have to bring in that same amount of money. You can't just do a big salary dump. So, you'd have to move other pieces. So it's awkward. And like if you're the Pacers, while you're also thinking, maybe this isn't the fit, maybe you don't want to pay this guy. He also is in a sense, an asset you've never had before. Like that you haven't had in years and years and years and years. He's top 9 pick. It's not normal for you. You don't, and so it's like you have to get a return on that if you're going to let him go. Like you can't draft a guy that high and him having the kind of talent he's got and not get something back for him. So it's going to be it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough decisions on that moving forward. And so, obviously what you're trying to do this year is you're trying to make him fit as well as he can. You want to go see him in playoffs, and, you want to get a better sense of, okay, how does this guy fit when you're in those scenarios? Do you need him as a playoff asset, as a bench scorer? And can you overpay for him? And again, you can go way high on the second apron, but it just restricts what you can do going forward. And it more kind of locks you into, these are your guys, and this is the people you have to roll with.
Well, the asset is a bench piece. I think that's really what separated the Pacers in last year's playoff stretches, where the bench got in there, and you would see the bench scoring numbers were, so much higher for the Pacers, and that second unit really because playoff basketball is so much more intense. Every possession is they're playing defense. It's not just like, all right, we're just going to let you go out and get your rebound. I'll get the ball back. We'll go, like it is a high intensity. And so that second unit, that's what. Now, yes, the Knicks were on like their third or fourth string players, but they were just worn out, and the Pacers just outran them. They just
they were on their second string players, but Tibbs didn't play his second string players all year.
That's true. Still hasn't.
They were just their second string players were like forgotten. They didn't know how to get off the bench. They were like, "Wait, me? Are you sure?" Because like they didn't take Josh Hart off the floor.
Didn't Josh Hart or was it Michael Bridges or Josh Hart? One of them said, Tibbs, like this season, like a couple weeks ago, maybe, hey, can you start playing the bench a little more, because something's going to happen again.
Yeah, no, it's obvious. And I think, and obviously, I had some debates with like Knicks fans on Twitter about this, and they were like, well, don't tell me these guys were any good, but it's like he had to get minutes. Like Alec Burks came in, after Anunoby got hurt, and had some games where he hit like 12 points and hit like 4 threes in a row. And so it's just like you're going to wear those guys out. And that was ultimately, really key for the Pacers. It's very key for their the fact that they want to full court press you, basically they want to play full court man to man, pick up the ball handler for 94 feet. It requires depth, and they want to be able to do that. Not only, have Andrew Nembhard pick up the point guard for 94 feet and TJ McConnell get in the backcourt and get some steals. But if you counter by, letting your pretty skilled power forward bring the ball up, they'll have Pascal Siakam hound you for 94 feet. And that's asking a lot, but, so to do that, you got to be able to take those guys off the floor and give them a rest. And what's going to be interesting for when you see Mathurin worked into that is that, obviously the 2 highest scoring guys off the bench for the Pacers were TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin. McConnell obviously can be an ISO guy, can just break you down off the bounce and get in there and get his mid-range jumper or his layup or whatever.
The baseline, yeah.
Yeah, go baseline and do his McConnell stuff. Mathurin is going to be a different kind of force to work in there. Obi's obviously the guy that's just going to get those transition buckets, like he's outrunning you on the break. And sometimes he's cheating. Sometimes he's leaking out and not rebounding and not being a piece of the defensive rebound to go get a bucket that way. And sometimes it works and sometimes it costs you a defensive rebound. But ultimately it was stuff that kind of fit in with the rest of the guys that if you had, 1 or 2 starters on there, basically they fit in. Mathurin, is another situation where he plays a different style. So like what is the impact he's going to make in as a bench guy? And it might be a lot. It might be a whole lot. There might be a lot of occasions where the defense breaks down and you need, the offense breaks down and you need this guy to go get a bucket and have more situations like you were in last week, or it might not. And so that is going to be, it's going to be very interesting to see what that crucible looks like for him. Whether it plays, it might absolutely play to his strong suits and it might not. And so I'll be very interested to see. And what it also might do is some days it does and some days it doesn't. And it could, you certainly have seen a lot of guys on playoff teams, where, it's this guy game, and maybe he goes 2 games and he scores 5 or 6 points, but for whatever reason, game 3 in this series, he gets 25. And that's the reason you win the series. Like his scoring is in that day, even if he didn't give you anything else the rest of the series, that game was a game changer. And maybe Mathurin could be something like that. So there's a lot of possibilities there. And certainly you're going to want all those data points before they make the decisions on what I imagine they're going to offer a contract extension. It's just a question of for how much. And, before you determine what you're going to have.
And whether he accepts it.
Right, exactly. Whether it's enough, and whether you're willing to, if he says no, whether you're willing to dial it up after that. So that's going to be, I think, the interesting piece before they determine exactly how big of an offer they're going to put out there. Because it can't be a max deal at this point. I just cannot imagine it's one investing, you'd have 3 guys on max contracts. It would be harder to justify keeping Miles Turner in that case. If you're going to have him, Siakam and Mathurin, Siakam and Halliburton all on max.
And then is he still a bench player? You have a max.
You can't. Yeah. You can't go that high. So it's like, okay, can you go 20? Can you go 25 a year? Can you, 30 sounds impossible. So, and it's like, all right, and you could also ask the question, does he deserve more money than Andrew Nembhard does? It's 3 years, 58, can you justify paying him more than you're paying Nembhard, who, is, I don't think he's going to qualify games wise for all defensive team, but I think he would make it if he did, I don't
Anthony Edwards sure seems to think he might be
locked up Anthony last night, 1 of 11 from 3. Rick Carlisle did make a point, Edwards had his thumb injury, and apparently that made a difference. Probably did. He probably has some looks he usually makes, but still did not make his life easier, has made life difficult all year, and has been a really good facilitator, has been a guy who fits in anything they ask him to do. So does it make sense to pay Mathurin more than you're paying him? Maybe, but how much?
And has shown a propensity to hit big shots. He doesn't shy away from the big moment, sure. Even if he's a guy who only shoots maybe 7 or 8 times a game. He's okay and comfortable and confident enough to hit those big shots.
Even if he goes 0 for 3, 0 for 4 for 3 the rest of the game, if that ball finds him with 30 seconds to go, he's not afraid of it. I mean, Andrew Nembhard is utterly fearless, and so is Mathurin. That's what makes both of them who they are, and interesting fits as a draft class together. But they're just both super confident, super fearless dudes, just different skill sets, but not afraid of anything, and the type of guys you need, if you're trying to make a leap as the Pacers have been.
All right, let's take a quick look at the week that was. The 10
madness.
days that were the craziness. Monday night, nice and easy, just relaxation. You could actually start right maybe a little bit in the fourth quarter without having to blow up the whole story.
Yes.
Like the past few games. It's
rare.
just been, it's been one thing after another, whether it's a fight, whether it's 4 starters being out of a game and still managing to win on the road against a West Coast playoff team. I mean, it's just ridiculousness. So what has that been like, just this wild ride for you, covering the team, but also like within that locker room, like, are they like aware of just how nuts it's been?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tyrese coming out and saying, well, we apparently can't win normal games. But I mean, it was interesting. Just all the circumstances were just dramatically different. Like and it's like odd, you go 5 in a row. Generally, there's a thread. Generally there's like, okay, they're doing this really well, and this guy's playing really well, or something. And even like a lot of games can be slightly different in a stretch like that. But you could usually say, okay, this is what they're doing really well, and nobody can stop it right now. And like, I mean, they had just dramatically different, kind of roster compositions on every night, and they were just a different team. They were different. They were a different team all 5 games. Obviously the first one against Minnesota, most impressive win they've had all year. I mean, you go into that and you're like, okay, Halliburton's out, Siakam's out, Turner's out, Neesmith's out. You're like, okay, well, I mean, and they're playing a Timberwolves team at full strength that I think had won 8 in a row at that point. And coming off a conference finals run themselves. Anthony Edwards is becoming one of the biggest stars in this game. And you're like, all right, well, there's just, what are they going to do? How do they have any hope of pulling this off on the road? And they're on a 3-game road swing. It's like, okay, well, just go out, get weird. Anything they do to make it interesting is positive. And I thought, hey, they kept it close for a half. That's something. It was like, okay, it's still close. It's overtime. And oh my God, Obi Toppin's got 34 and he's drilling 4 threes in overtime. And that I think was probably, I mean, like this is a joyful team, generally. I've rarely seen them that just giddy, because it was just like everybody gets to be a part of it.
Tony Bradley almost had a double-double.
Yeah, Tony Bradley goes for 12 and 9, and it was cool. Like we had already talked to him about just joining, the Pacers, getting back in the NBA, and he was just saying, how he lost his confidence, felt like he was getting back. But I mean, like then he kind of really dug into the emotion of that while talking about it. He's just like, man, he's like, it's just so meaningful. He's like, when like I didn't know if I was ever going to get back here, and I really didn't feel confident. And I wasn't sure, but I just told myself if I was ever going to do it, I was just going to go all out. And, don't know if he's won himself a job going forward into next year, if anybody else is going to sign him and keep him in the league, but, he gets the rest of this year, largely on the basis of that game, goes out, hits his first 3 shots. And that really, I thought, got them going in the first place. They was like, well, Tony Bradley's here to play. Like heck with it, just let loose and try to win this game and be dangerous. And they were. And I mean, like that was really meaningful for him. Quentin Jackson's been a guy who's been thrust into a whole bunch of scenarios as a 2-way contract guy.
I like Quentin Jackson.
He's got some guy plays all out. He is gutsy. He's got some athleticism. He's not afraid of anything. He kicked around the G League for how many years before he got any shot, even to get on a 2-way. And, like every time he goes out there, I mean, he plays like he's afraid of nothing and goes all out and is like, hey, going for it, and when he was in the first time when Nembhard, Neesmith and Shepherd were all injured, Quentin Jackson was taking on the best perimeter defensive assignment every night and hounding him, and losing usually, not necessarily stopping the guy from scoring, but like making him notice, making whatever all-star he was guarding notice that Quentin Jackson was gonna, get up in his grill that day. And he might overplay some stuff and he might get himself out of position, but, by God, he was going to go all out. And when he had a chance to dunk the ball, he was going to let loose on that and attack the rim because he can really get up. I mean, he is a pretty good physical specimen, skinny guy, but got a lot of athleticism and leaping ability. And not afraid. And so like he was into it. And again, Obi, like you can't not like Obi Toppin. Obi's one of the just nicest, most happy-go-lucky human beings you've ever met. And so, guys were just ecstatic to see him have that kind of night. But everybody contributed. I mean, and I thought it was cool, Rick Carlisle calls out Enrique Freeman, who was obviously there and available, and Chris Finch, when Andrew Nemhard gets his second technical with the Rudy Gobert scuffle, he gets to pick whoever he wants to take the free throw. So of course he takes the guy who's like 65% college free throw shooter, hasn't checked into the game yet at all, hadn't played an NBA game in like a month or something like that. Obviously played a lot of G League work in that time. You could come off cold and shoot the free throws, and Freeman nails both of them. And Rick Carlisle called him out in the post game locker room kind of celebration. So those guys it was a wild battle.
In a game that goes to overtime, those 2 points, I mean,
they're massive. Every single game is massive. And it's like that's can be a weird inflection point when you have that type of battle, obviously, Nemhard it seems like he accidentally caught Conley in the face. So Rudy Gobert very not accidentally hits Andrew Nemhard in the face hard. And Nemhard throws the basketball back at him. And so you've got a scuffle there. And sometimes those benefit the home team, as much as you each lose a really good defender or a really good player, that those tend to benefit the home team because it gets the fan base, riled up, and the fans in the stands riled up. It gets, like you're already down 4 starters. There's your 5th, none of the guys who usually start for the Pacers are available in the last quarter and a half, of that game. And so you're
and then Mathurin fouls out. Your 6th starter, Mathurin fouls out.
Yeah, exactly.
And they still win.
And they still pull this off. And so it's just like, it was wild. And it was also wild considering, man, the bench had a terrible game against Milwaukee, like horrendous. I mean, like if, the starters were like plus 10, plus 12, plus 13, something like that. When they had their starting 5 on the floor, I mean, they were by far the better team. And like the bench squandered a lot in that game. And, McConnell comes out and says, they were pitiful. It was, used the term pitiful. TJ didn't play well individually at all in that game. And they come back, and it's not only the bench, it's guys that are even deeper than that, guys that, again, two-way guys, guys that are, Jarris Walker, guys that aren't getting a ton of minutes. Everybody got out in that game and made a huge impact. They end up with 7 guys in double figures. Again, when you're missing 4 starters, and obviously both of the guys that get rung, Nemhard for 2 techs and Mathurin for the 6 fouls. Those guys are 2 of them, but still, you had to go find 5 other guys to score in double figures. And that was wild. So you go from that game that is just this incredible high, and they come back to Dallas, and now Dallas is the shorthanded team. Dallas is missing everybody. And Dallas comes out and almost pulls it off. And so like the Pacers in an opposite scenario, but as much as they kind of, they looked really kind of mature and sharp, like they were going to put this game away early, and then they blow it. But then, they're down 7 with a minute to go, and they rally all the way back, and Mathurin does some crazy stuff in that game. And they come back Thursday, and they're gassed. I've never, like truly gassed by Thursday, just absolutely exhausted. 5th game in 7 days with a road trip in there, second back-to-back in a week, second night of a second back-to-back in a week. And they just hold on for dear life in that game, to pull that one off and win that one in overtime. And Saturday, you're like, oh, this is finally gonna be a normal basketball game. They've got everybody. Brooklyn doesn't really want to win. Pacers are up 20, and they managed to blow it entirely before they pick it up just enough to get, those games. And then finally they show up Monday against, again, a really good team. And you're like, all right, like if they're going to mess around like they did Saturday, they're going to get crunched. And these guys are going to want to beat them because they just got embarrassed at home by your team without 4 starters. They're going to want to whoop you. And then that ends up being the sturdiest, game that they've played. And so it's been all over the place. And there's definitely a sense that this is wild. This is crazy. And we, and really several of those games that it shouldn't have been like that. With the exception, I think, of Brooklyn, because I think Brooklyn, they were aware that everybody was playing on fumes. And, anything they were able to pull off in that game, that first Brooklyn game, was going to be fine. They just needed a day off, just badly. They just needed to crawl to the finish line and get themselves a day without playing a basketball game. But it's been wild. But, I mean, you come out of it, and they got some help last night. Milwaukee loses to Phoenix. Kevin Durant comes up, with just a killer 3 to big moment. Devin Booker hits a mid-range, bucket to really clinch that one for them. And that's big. I mean, they've benefited from the fact that the Bucks are on a West Coast swing right now, and those can get weird. Obviously, when you're an Eastern time zone team or you're Eastern Conference team at all, and they're not an Eastern time zone, I screwed that up. But bottom line, big win there for the Pacers purposes for Phoenix. And, they're up 2 going into this, obviously, tough one, Wednesday night against the Lakers, but find themselves in a position where they've got a little bit of cushion, going forward. And they got some tough ones there. They got Oklahoma City out there on Saturday. That's going to be a real tough one to deal with. They've still got a couple more against Cleveland on the board. But, to get a little bit of separation there really matters. They could benefit more if they could get, I think the Bucks still have the Nuggets on this trip. If Joker could step up and get them another win, that puts them in really good shape. But I mean, this really, for a weird week, sets them up nice after they lost at Milwaukee, after they'd kind of given away the tiebreaker in that battle. Get a bunch of wins, get some breaks with Milwaukee on the road, and find themselves in a much better position than they were to start the week.
All right, well, we've talked about playoff seeding. We've talked about Mathurin. Let's get to the game that everyone's going to be looking at on Wednesday night. The Lakers come to town. LeBron, Luka, national TV game, ESPN. This time ESPN actually will get to see the stars since they moved the Pacers-Lakers game to ESPN last time, and no one ended up playing. Kind of a dud for ESPN. Sorry about that.
They got to see Austin Reeves scored 45 points. I mean, that was something, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, that was something. Here's hoping that doesn't happen again on Wednesday night. But obviously when the Lakers come to town, when LeBron comes to town, there's a little more juice in the building.
Sure.
A lot of times he actually doesn't play when they play in Gainbridge. He seems to sit out quite a bit when he's here, but they'll be playing, correct? We're going to see LeBron and we're going to see Luka on Wednesday.
As far as we know, I mean, it would be dumb for him not to play. I mean, obviously, it's one of those situations where it isn't. We're not talking about mid-January here. We're talking about late March, and they're down to 2-3 weeks. Obviously, he's played the last couple after I think it was a groin issue, and they've lost a couple. And so that's an issue. I think they lost 2 in a row. Is it 3 in a row? They just lost to Orlando last night. And so, they are in a battle for, they've got a shot at second in the West. I mean, that's a battle with them in Denver and Houston and whatnot. So who have they lost to? I mean, they lost some dumb ones. They've lost 3 in a row, got torched by Milwaukee when they were missing, I think, Luka and LeBron. He comes back for the Bulls game. They get thumped by the Bulls, which is probably the worst game they've played all year. And they got beat by 12 in Orlando last night. So they lost 3 in a row by double figures. So they're losing some ground, and they don't need to lose ground. So basically, if you're LeBron, you don't need to be skipping the games you can play at this point. So I'd be really surprised if you see, obviously the injury report comes out in a couple hours. I'd be really shocked to see, LeBron not playing unless something went wrong. But they're a game back of Denver for third. They're 2.5 back of Houston for second. You want to get in a position first off. I mean, you want to be, I think, top 3 because you don't want to set yourself up for the possibility of having to play the Thunder in the semifinals. You'd at least like to be able to. I think if you're them, be in the bottom half of that bracket. You've beaten Denver in a I think they've beaten Denver in a playoff series before, but I mean, you can, I think, you got to believe that you can beat Denver. If it's you and them in 2 and 3, you've got to believe that you can beat Houston, who's a super talented, gritty, but very young team that I think most think is a year away from really making a push. But I think you got to recognize that Thunder team is ready, and you want to push that series back as far as you can. And catch them. Maybe you can catch them in the Western Conference Finals when they're starting to get nervous about, getting to an NBA Finals and making that, really big leap. But I mean, those guys are awesome. I mean, they are, they're on the pace to win 65, 66, 67 games somewhere on that range. I mean, if they run the table and it's not out of the question that they can, they're at 59 and 12 now. So you want to avoid them. You want to avoid the 4 seeds so that you don't have to face them in a semi as opposed to a final. And so there's a lot of meaning for the Lakers right now. And again, they're not playing well. They have to pick it up. They have to get right. And so they're not in a position where they can afford to be like, who cares about playing in Indianapolis? They're not in that position anymore. And obviously they've helped themselves out to get to that spot. They're a whole lot better team than they were when they got Luka in the first place. And certainly you saw just them go on a streak and kind of see top 4 in the West as a possibility that it didn't seem to be. at certain times in this year. But, they have to get right. They have to find a rhythm. They have to shake off whatever they've been doing. So they don't need games where they're, shorthanded. So basically, if LeBron can play, he's going to play. If Luka can play, he's going to play. They're not throwing another one. They're not in a position to throw another one away.
Okay. Well, it's going to be a big week in Indianapolis for basketball, which is nice because we like basketball here in Indiana. We've got Wednesday, Lakers come to town. Friday, you got the NCAA Sweet 16, Purdue, Houston, Tennessee, Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky, of course. We always love it when the folks from Big Blue Nation come visit Indianapolis. And then Saturday, you got the boys basketball state finals all day long at Gainbridge Fieldhouse as well. So high school basketball on Saturday, and then Sunday, Elite Eight. So
yeah.
Better carve up.
And the Pacers play the Thunder on Saturday, so I mean they're going to be in Oklahoma City, but
that's at Oklahoma.
That's
City.
elsewhere. It's not in Indy, but it says for your TV watching at the bar after you watched other games purposes, that will be of interest on Saturday. But obviously Total Wild Week certainly works out. You couldn't ask for, considering Indiana didn't make it, could not ask for better than Purdue and Kentucky as far as drawing a fan base.
And Kelvin Sampson coming back to town.
Yeah, no, a lot of, you get a 1-1, 1-4-3-2, like Sweet 16. Doesn't happen all the time. With big fan bases, with interesting games. I think Tennessee, Kentucky is going to be a wild one on Saturday, on Friday night. I mean, that's going to be just fantastic. Really interesting basketball. That game could be really nuts. And I think that's been fun all year. I think that's been they've had some really fun games. As much as Indy, like Tennessee and Kentucky fans hate each other. Like it's not Kentucky Louisville and it's not Kentucky Indiana, but Tennessee and Kentucky hate each other. So that's fun. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a great week. A lot of fun basketball going forward. Yeah. Starts with a really interesting one on Wednesday to kind of, it's obviously a regular season NBA game. It's not the same as Sweet 16 and Elite 8 in terms of its gravity. But
it's the Lakers and it's Luka.
LeBron, it's Luka. It's going to be fun stuff. It's going to be wild. So it's going to be interesting. So a lot of reason to be over at game. To be downtown to watch some hoops this weekend.
All right. And Indy Star will have you covered. We'll have everything on IndyStar.com and in the print edition, but we know everyone is digital now. So be sure to get to IndyStar.com and follow Dustin on social medias. Are you on, you're on Twitter. Are you on Blue Sky?
I'm on Blue Sky. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm trying to.
Is anyone on Blue Sky? Is that working? Is Blue Sky working for people?
That's a very long political conversation, Matt.
Okay. Well, I don't have time for that because I got to get my kid off the bus.
No, you don't. But I am on it, so you can follow me on Blue Sky. I am trying to pace myself and post on both, and that's not for political reasons. That's because I am trying to connect as many readers as I can, and trying to give everybody everything. So if you're on Twitter, cool. If you're not going to do that anymore, you can find me on Blue Sky too.
That's great. And I plug your stuff into Reddit, so people see me right there on Reddit as well. Yeah. All right. Well, he is Dustin DePurak. I'm Mac Lennis. This has been From Way Downtown. Thanks again for listening. And again, we'll have you covered at IndyStar.com.